Okay, the next speaker you already know is going to be Stéphane Nicoll. Stéphane Nicoll I also happened to have met in Minsk at JFuture last year. And the funny thing is, and that's kind of why I asked them to be on the same day, is they were doing a joint talk at Spring One. Hey, you're going to tell me, Stéphane, has it been cancelled or not? The Spring with Marit? Did it happen?
Yeah, so it was supposed to be in May at Spring I/O Barcelona, and they moved it to an online event, moving the conference to October. But then the conference was cancelled.
All right, cancelled. Okay, well, you have chance to be virtually together for a minute here. Thanks for being there. You're going to introduce us to Spring Boot and start Spring I/O. And I'm not going to say much about it because you're going to do it. So I think I'll just leave you the stage. Thanks for being here, and I'll be backstage if you need me.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Okay, so hello, everyone. So my name is Stéphane Nicoll. I'm working on the Spring Boot project, and I'm also the lead of StartupSpring.io that you can see right now. It's a way to get started with Spring. So very quickly introducing the project, and then we move to what you've been looking for here today is how you can contribute with some practical examples there. So Spring is an application development platform on the JVM. Spring Boot in particular is your entry point to build an application with Spring. So if you go to StartupSpring.io, you see that you can get started quite easily selecting the language on the JVM you want to use, your favorite build system, some info about your project. Then you can select a number of dependencies to whatever use case you have to implement. And the thing that's quite unique, or at least what we introduced in the ecosystem, is the concept of auto configuration. So it's a way for the application to react to choices that you've made, so dependencies you've added to the project. So for instance, if I type web, so I'm basically opting for a web application. So I'm going to build a web application, and I'm adding something that allows me to monitor and manage my application. It's a concept in Spring Boot that's called the actuator. If I'm adding those, Spring Boot will react to the fact that they've been added as dependencies, and it will configure things for you if you haven't expressed any opinion. So let's generate a project, and let's open that quickly in my IDE. So this is the empty project that you get from StartupSpring.io based on my choices there. So I can see I'll get back my 2 entries that I've selected. We call that starter in Spring Boot. So it's a way to group dependencies that are that basically provide a feature. And there is not much to it really, right? It's an empty application. Because it's a web application, we added some directories automatically for you for static resources and templates if you choose to use that. An empty configuration file, and there's also a skeleton test that basically you need to fill in or implement whatever your application is doing. So if I run this app, Spring Boot, it's like running a main. The simplest thing you could do in Java. That's actually going to bootstrap the container, and you'll get a web application running. So because you've opted in for the web starter, it will basically bring up a Tomcat server in this case. And looking at some endpoint here, you can see that some default services have been created. Okay, so Spring Boot there's a lot of things to learn about the project if you're interested, if you're working on the JVM, if you want to give it a try. So now I'm just going to focus more on contributing to the project and basically try to provide an example to what Marit already explained in the previous session. So to get started, Spring Boot is on GitHub. So if you Google it, if you Google Spring Boot, it's probably one of the top hits. It's in the Spring Project organization. If you look at this project, you'll see that there is a number of resources in the home directory you'll find. In the README, you'll get some help to get started with the project, and where you can find documentation, where you can submit issues. So that's, if you're new to the project, that's usually a good place to start, because not all projects work the same way, as Merit explained. So for instance, some projects don't mind if you ask questions in the issue tracker, and others prefer that you use a dedicated tool for that. So for instance, in our case, we prefer to use a Stack Overflow for questions, and we also have a Gitter channel. I'll come back to that in a minute. So if you want support, there is a dedicated tool for that, and the issue tracker is not the right place to do so. So one of these resources is contributing. You'll find the same file pretty much everywhere in the Spring organization. So if you go to, for instance, Spring Security or Spring Data or Spring Framework even, which is the core framework, the lower level part of Spring Boot, or any Spring project really, we try to follow the same conventions. So you'll find a contributing page where you'll get some information that are specific to the project, like how is there any code convention? So is there any pattern that we use to format the code, or is there something that we look at, or something that we prefer to do in a certain way? So in the case of Spring Boot, we try to automate as much as we can. So we have both a check style config, which will check the code and fail the build if there are some rules that are violated. And we also have a format plugin, which formats the code in a consistent manner. So if you run the build, all those will be applied automatically, and you'll get some report if there is some issue in the code that you've changed. The contributing page will also have some information for you to build a project, to open a project in your IDE, because those tools need to be configured. So in the case of the format plugin, for instance, we also have a plugin for Eclipse, IntelliJ IDE, and NetBeans, I believe, or maybe not. I don't remember now. No, I think it's on the IntelliJ IDE and Eclipse. So if you use any of those, that page will explain where you can find the plugin, how to install it, etc., etc. So this is really your place to look at before you start actually submitting your first pull request, because depending on the nature of your contribution, you'll find some interesting resource. Then if you're stuck, or if you need help, or if you need support, there's also a standard page in pretty much every Spring project called support, and that page will tell you where you can get support, basically. So as I've mentioned, in the case of Spring, it's mostly Stack Overflow for questions. And we also have a Gitter channel, so in case you don't know Gitter, gitter.im, it's a way to basically build a chat room for a GitHub repository, pretty much. And there's all other integration, but that's how we use it. So if you go to Spring Project/Spring Boot, which you'll find the link in the README in the support page, then you can get any questions and talk to the community. And the nice part about this is answers to questions are not only from maintainers, but anybody actually using Spring Boot, people that are connected, can answer you live. It's a different way to interact with the community. All right, so let's go with actually simulate what would happen if you contribute a pull request. And as Merit also mentioned, before you start going with something a bit more involved, it's better to talk to the team first, because you may spend significant time and actually turns out that this is something that we don't want to add to the project, or that we prefer to be done differently. So one thing that we use is something in GitHub called GitHub templates, where whenever you create an issue and a pull request, as I'll show in a minute, you'll get some help, basically. So typically telling you, do not raise an issue if that's a question, if you're reporting a security vulnerability, because we have a separate channel to report that responsibly. As Merit mentioned in our session, don't open an issue for dependency upgrades, because we do that. We prefer to do that ourselves. So all that is basically explained here. So while preparing this session, I've actually found a typo somewhere. Let me try to find it back. There we go. So there is a typo here where IntelliJ is spelled with a capital I at the end, and it shouldn't be. The last G should be a capital I, but not I. So it's from the contributing ADOC page. I could obviously update directly from the GitHub API, but let's do the long run here and showcase what you need to do. So the first thing you need to do, you go to the project and you click fork here, and then you choose your account. As you can see on my personal account, I already forked the project, so I don't need to do anything. It's already forked. So this is my project. Once you fork the project, you can either clone your fork, or better yet, clone the actual project itself. So to clone it, you go back here, you click on code, and there is some URI here. You copy it, and then you type git, you go to some random directory, or let me increase the font here. You type git clone and the URI, and that's going to create, in this case, a directory called Spring Boot with the project. I've already done that. The first thing I need to do is just make sure I'm up to date with master. In this case, the pull request I'm about to submit is very, very simple. So it's not like you're changing a lot of code, but if you're changing code and that code has changed in the meantime, you'll get some merge conflict. So try to avoid that as much as you can. The other thing that's is something that often newcomers don't do is make sure you create a branch for your submission, because if you don't create a branch and you submit your pull request off your view of master, if you try to be up to date with master because it has evolved, so potentially your change has not been merged yet, you may actually automatically close your pull request if you try to reset, for instance, your view of master. So make sure that you create a branch first. So I've created my branch. I go to whatever thing I need to do, whatever business I need to do to my branch. There we go. So this is the problem here. It's a typo, and the usual Git stuff. We have no change now. You can make sure everything is square. And then the next step is you need to push that change somewhere, but you can't push it to the main repository, because as a new contributor, you don't have access rights to it. So you need to push that on your fork. So that's the main reason why you forked it. So let me go back there. Okay. It'll be easier if I tap it here. Okay, so this is my fork. I do the same thing. I basically take the URI of my fork, and then I'm going to add a remote to it. So to do that, to add an extra repository basically to your repo, you use the remote command with the add option. Then you give it a symbolic name and your the URI of your remote. So now you can basically pull and push from origin if you have the rights, and pull and push from Nicoll. So I'm going to push to Nicoll this time, and basically giving my branch. So that's basically pushing my change to GitHub so that I can actually create a pull request. You can see in this case that GitHub also hint me as, oh, do you want to create a pull request for this? So you could click on this link. That's going to create a pull request for you, but I'm going to show you how you can also do that from the web UI. So if you go back to your project here, you'll get this thing. Otherwise, what you can also do is browse to the branch, and basically you'll have an option to create a pull request. So clicking this is basically the same thing as clicking this link. So I'm opening a pull request in Spring Boot. Notice that the organization has changed. Also, something that we see is people trying to play with pull requests, and they don't realize that they're actually going to create a pull request in the main repository, not in their repository. So whenever you hit the create pull request, you're basically leaving your fork and you go back to the main repo. And you can see that because the context here has changed. So again, same thing, you're about to submit a pull request, and we've given you some hints, like if you're trying to fix a security vulnerability, or if you're trying to update a dependency, please stop, because we don't accept those. And then you can double check. Actually, you can't. Yes, you can. You can double check here that you've done what you were supposed to do. So there you go. You've submitted your first pull request. I guess I'm happy to answer questions now.
We do have a few, actually.
Okay, let's go.
Let's see. I'm going to remove your screen. Thank you. I have a question first. You showed the whole flow for creating pull. I'll show your screen again, maybe. Can you explain in the list of issues, if I wanted to help and before creating a pull request, what would be a good way to find issues that are welcoming?
Yes.
And I know you have a precise.
Yep, I forgot to actually show that. You're right. So in any project, each project in GitHub has this notion of labels, which different projects use differently. So if you click on issues, you'll get a bunch of issues here. Then you have this label thing on the right-hand side. So if you click on that, you'll find some that usually they have the same patterns, like help wanted or good first user or something like that. What we use ourselves is first timers only. So let me actually increase the font a bit here. First timers only, for which we really craft the issue in such a way that someone that never contributed to open source can contribute. And ideal for contribution, which is something that's not crafted in a way that will go step by step with you, but rather the issue itself feels like small enough so that someone who did not contribute to the project yet can contribute. So if we click on the first timer, we don't have at the moment, but let's have a look to, I don't know, this one, for instance, just to say something. We have this template that we fill, where we basically giving you as much detail as we can. What's the problem? What's the solution? So we're actually telling you what you need to do, and we're telling you where you need to change the code and why you need to change the code. And then you have some steps to fix it. And usually we prefer to keep those issues for minorities. So group with minorities, we prefer to make sure that those folks get a chance to contribute. And the ideal for contribution, we have 4 at the moment. So if you want to get started, feel free to have a look to that.
All right, thanks. I really like, I see you tweet about that sometimes, and I really like it. You take like a whole lot of, great amount of effort to really help someone. So I appreciate it a lot. Let's go to the question from the audience first. Jeroen, do I let you read it, or do you want me to read it for you? Yeah.
No, I can read it. That's fine. Thank you. So since it can be daunting even for seasoned devs to build and run tests for a large project like this, it might become an obstacle for contributing. Any tips for maintainers around this? I guess that was from or for? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think he's asking how maintainers can handle
So
can help contributors in that way?
Yeah, so it's a very good question. So one thing is, for Spring Boot, I can only answer for Spring Boot. I mean, happy to have a discussion outside of the boundaries of Spring Boot. But what we have now is we use Gradle with Gradle Cache and Gradle Enterprise. So basically, whenever a project, a certain state of the project has been built, the result is pushed on a shared repo. And when you, as a user, you build, you get a chance to download that rather than compiling everything and testing everything. So essentially, when you run the build, you're very much likely to only run a small portion of it because some stuff in your cache are not up to date. So of course, if you contribute one every 2 months on the project, you won't get the same benefit as we do because we build like multiple times a day. But me, when my cache is fresh, is up to date, sorry, basically run the build, and sometimes the build takes like 30 seconds to run everything because Gradle has noticed that I only change that file, and that file has an impact only on those things. And it will only rebuild that and only run the test for that. That being said, ignoring that, I mean, we don't expect a contributor to run the full build, right? If you're changing a class and that class has dedicated tests in a certain package, it would be nice at least to run those tests, and that would be a good thing. And for that, both Gradle and Maven have options. So Gradle has a -- test where you can provide a pattern, which is something I'm using all the time. I even have an alias for that. So I have an alias called check. And check is going to run Gradle with the check style and the formatting check. And the argument that I provide is a pattern for test, and it's only going to run the test that matches the pattern. If you use Maven, you can type ambient test -d test equals, and then put a pattern and make sure to quote it, because if you put a star, it will go sideways with bash. And that, again, will basically run a regular expression on your test and only run those.
And I'm guessing you always have CI afterwards, right? When you create your pull request.
Yeah, so yeah.
You will have visual.
Okay, from a maintainer's perspective, this is something personally that I don't like, is someone actually writing some code and then pushing that and submitting the pull request and waiting for our CI to tell them if they screw up something. Because it's actually, the reason why it annoys me is because it's a very practical detail. Spring Boot has 3,000 watchers, and every time you push a commit, basically GitHub is sending an email to 3,000 people. So in order to reduce the noise in notifications, I think it's better.
I thought we were going to talk about the computing time, but you're actually talking about basically spamming users. Okay, or spamming contributors in that case. Okay, interesting. Thanks. Let's see. Rakesh has a few questions. Do you have separate branch with feature in Pivotal, or do you commit all the code directly to GitHub?
So just practically, but Pivotal does not exist anymore. The Spring team now is at VMware. Just practical detail for you to know. We don't have private branches, no. So everything, absolutely everything we do is open source. There is no private secret Spring Boot thing at this time.
Okay, let me go back to the comments. Next, shoot. Oh, FS and DS. Do you have any clue what that might mean? I don't. I'll come back to the question if you write exactly what FS and DS means, Rakesh. And I'll go to your next question directly. Oh, that's a more specific question to Spring Boot.
Yeah, so that's a very good question. So we don't have like an extended documentation to tell contributors this is how that thing is architectured, and that thing is calling that thing, and this is important for those and those reasons. And the main reason for that is because we mostly our specification is the code and the test that goes with it. And writing documents like this would be a huge amount of work for us, and it would very easily be outdated. So we have design documents on the wiki when we're discussing about which is public, like everything else. When we're discussing about a feature and we're not sure about which way we need to go, or when we're doing spikes, we usually post the spike on the wiki as well, so that others can find it. You won't get a reference documentation for contributors. This is really a lot of work. The reference guide alone is like a ton of work in its own. So yeah, I'm afraid we don't have that.
Okay. I think that answers your second question as well, Rakesh. Rakesh was talking about functional specifications and design specifications.
Yeah. No, we don't have that.
That's interesting answer. I like it. My architect will like it a bit less, I guess. I do have a last question for you, which is a little of a sidetrack, I guess. But how do you manage your way into working full-time for open source? And that goes back a bit to the question for Marit earlier. Did you start as a contributor and then move your way into Pivotal, or did you have another path?
Yeah, I guess so. It's a complex question. There is many ways to see how it went, and I'm not entirely sure I have the answer to that. But I started to contribute to Maven in 2002, I believe. That was Maven 1 and XML, and annotation processor generating other annotations. That kind of nightmare. Xdoclet at the time, for those who are old enough to remember that stuff.
That's like one generation too old for me. Came after that.
So when it was the time of the 8GB and you have to create the local and the remote interface, you had like class with annotation that would actually implement those things, because it was really a lot of boilerplate. So you had something that reads annotation that would generate code, and that code would be compiled and generate some more annotations. Nothing to do with Maven, but I already contributed to that.
Sounds interesting.
It wasn't. So I contributed to Maven 1, then I switched to Maven 2, then I started to, at work, we've started to work a bit on Spring because we had the batch framework. So we decided to rewrite our infrastructure using Spring Batch. And at the time, there were a number of features missing, because Spring Batch was really rising. It wasn't like the mature projects that we know today. So one thing they didn't have, for instance, is a way to run partitions on a cluster. Cluster, I know we don't talk about that anymore, but at the time it was a big thing. And because our infrastructure was distributed, we really needed that feature. So we basically moved our implementation from our homemade framework to Spring Batch. And I've started to contribute that way.
Okay.
Yeah. It took years from my team. I mean, I was like contributing for years before I joined the Spring Framework team 6 years ago.
All right. Thanks a lot, Nicoll, Stéphane. I think I really appreciate you also taking the time to come at the end of the day and speak to a screen, basically.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And I think you've got a message. We do have a Discord. I posted a comment in there. So if you want to join, we'll be there to help you. There is a few Java folks in the Discord, so we'll be there. And if you want to contribute to Spring Boot or start to Spring.io, he showed you already the way. Thanks for your time, Stéphane. I think we're going to wrap up.
Sure.
And, enjoy your evening. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.